You don't even notice it anymore. The scrolling, the numbing, the cheap dopamine hits. It feels normal because it's everywhere, because it's sold as freedom, but it's slavery dressed in pleasure. What they didn't tell you is that not everything that feels good is good for your soul. You were wired for depth, but you're feeding yourself noise. And that noise is quieting something sacred in you, your awareness, your presence, your hunger for something eternal. The comfort you're chasing is softening your spine, your mind, and your calling. And every time you reach for it, you trade real peace for a temporary escape. That's not living. That's sedation. You want to feel alive, but you keep choosing what makes you feel less human. Porn, fast food, empty hookups, endless reels. They're not evil because they exist. They're deadly because you let them define your rhythm. They train you to avoid stillness, to avoid reflection, to avoid conviction. That's how your soul begins to rot. Quietly, privately, without drama. It's not a single fall, it's erosion. One swipe at a time, one scroll, one lie. And by the time you realize how far you've drifted, the real you is buried under layers of artificial highs. That's what pleasure does when it becomes your god. It devours you from the inside out. Nobody wakes up and says, "Today, I'll waste my soul." But it happens slowly. You compromise what nourishes you in exchange for what entertains you. And it feels harmless because it's normalized. But Jesus never said, "Do what feels right." He said, "Deny yourself." That wasn't punishment, it was a warning. Because not every desire deserves to be followed. Some desires are parasites. They mimic comfort, but they breed dependency. And the more you follow them, the less you remember how to lead your own life. You stop choosing, you start reacting, and eventually, you lose the ability to recognize what peace really is. We live in a generation addicted to escape. We run from pain, from truth, from silence. But anything you won't face owns you. Jesus didn't avoid discomfort. He walked straight into it. And he calls you to do the same. Why? Because healing lives on the other side of resistance. Because growth demands friction. Because purpose won't compete with your pleasures. It will wait until you're ready to let them die. And make no mistake, something has to die. Either your addiction to comfort or your potential. And if you refuse to choose, the world will gladly choose for you. With a smile and a subscription. The soul doesn't starve all at once. It decays when you normalize the shallow. When you stop asking deeper questions. When you replace prayer with podcasts, meditation with entertainment, reflection with noise. And then you wonder why your peace feels fake. Why your confidence is hollow. Why your ambition leads to burnout instead of meaning. It's because you're feeding your body and starving your spirit. And Jesus didn't die so you could be numb. He died so you could be awake, alive in a way that no addiction can imitate. If you keep craving comfort, you'll keep killing the hunger that was designed to guide you back home. You were made to crave, but you were never meant to be ruled by what you crave. That's the line nobody wants to draw, because it's easier to call it freedom than to admit it's bondage. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." Not for dopamine, not for validation, not for likes, but for something real, something eternal, something that can't be delivered by a screen or sold as a lifestyle. And that kind of hunger only grows when you stop feeding yourself spiritual junk food. Real fulfillment starts where performance dies, where pleasure ends, where truth begins. They want you hooked. That's the business model. Keep you scrolling, keep you needing, keep you comparing. The more distracted you are, the less dangerous you become. The more entertained you are, the less likely you are to confront your patterns. That's why modern pleasure isn't just addictive, it's strategic. It's how the system keeps you tame. Jesus didn't come to help you cope. He came to wake you up. And the moment you start saying no to what everyone else says yes to, you'll feel it. Resistance, withdrawal, clarity, and eventually, authority. But you'll never get there if you keep feeding the beast that's quietly feeding on you. Don't be surprised when you start to feel angry, bored, or restless without your usual distractions. That's not a sign to give in. That's a sign you're finally detoxing. Your soul is remembering what silence feels like, what presence feels like, what God feels like. And it's uncomfortable at first. Because spiritual clarity requires detox from artificial stimulation, most people avoid it. They stay in the loop. They call it lifestyle. But you're not most people. You're called to a higher frequency, one that can't be reached through convenience. If you want peace, you have to endure the process of unlearning what destroyed it. There's a reason Jesus said, "Take up your cross," not your phone, not your comfort, your cross. He knew the truth. Freedom isn't found in indulging every desire. It's found in crucifying the ones that lie to you, the ones that promise relief but deliver regret. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest, about recognizing that not everything normal is neutral. Some habits are actually altars, and every time you return to them, you're offering a piece of your soul. It's not a habit, it's a sacrifice. And the only question is, who are you sacrificing to? Every screen you stare at has an agenda. It wants your time, your energy, your focus, and over time, it gets your identity. Because what you give your attention to shapes who you become. That's why Jesus often withdrew to be alone, to recalibrate, to hear clearly, to remember who he was. You think you're tired, but maybe you're just overstimulated. You think you're lost, but maybe you're just drowned in noise. The cure isn't doing more, it's disconnecting from what's been numbing you, because clarity doesn't shout, it whispers, and you'll never hear it if you keep feeding the static. Pleasure becomes dangerous when it starts defining what you think you need. It creeps in quietly. At first, it's just a way to relax. Then it's how you avoid stress. Then it's what you run to when you're alone. Before long, it's your comfort zone, your reward system, your identity. But the soul doesn't thrive in comfort zones. It dies there. Slowly, quietly, safely. That's the tragedy. You won't even feel it at first. But your hunger for truth fades. Your fire for purpose dims. And one day you wake up in a life that feels full, but you're empty. That's what unfiltered pleasure does. It steals without warning. You don't need another escape. You need to be confronted. And that's why truth will always feel violent before it feels healing. Because it cuts through the noise. It exposes the lie you've built your peace on. Jesus never promised numbness. He promised life. But life doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from facing it, from allowing the parts of you that feed on comfort to be put to death. That's resurrection, not hype, not motivation, but a brutal, holy confrontation with everything you've used to survive. Because survival isn't the goal, freedom is. You're not weak for being tempted. You're weak when you stop fighting. Temptation is not a test of your worth. It's a test of your awareness. And most people aren't aware. They don't even recognize how enslaved they've become to what feels good. But Jesus didn't say, feel better. He said, be free. And freedom doesn't come by accident, it comes through intention. Through saying no when everything in you wants to say yes. Through training your mind to choose spirit over sensation. Every time you resist, you're not just building discipline, you're reclaiming territory that pleasure stole from you. If you think peace means avoiding pain, you've already lost. Because pain is part of the process. Jesus didn't bypass the cross. He embraced it. And you can't carry resurrection if you refuse to carry death. Death to your distractions. Death to the identity you built around comfort. Death to the illusion that life is supposed to feel good all the time. You weren't called to chase good feelings. You were called to live in truth. And truth demands sacrifice. So ask yourself, what needs to die in you for real peace to live? Not everything that soothes you is healing you. Some of it is just making you quiet enough to forget you're bleeding. But Jesus doesn't do anesthesia. He does surgery. He doesn't numb you. He revives you. And revival hurts before it heals. That's why most people run. They don't want light. They want illusion. They don't want freedom. They want silence in the chaos. But you weren't made to manage your dysfunction. You were made to confront it, to outgrow it, to bury it. That's what resurrection requires. A funeral for everything fake that used to keep you going. Discipline doesn't mean perfection. It means decision. It means choosing who you want to become, even when your emotions want something else. Jesus fasted. Jesus withdrew. Jesus said no, not because he had to, but because he knew the cost of yes. You think you're being strong by holding it all together, but real strength is in surrender. In putting your phone down when your mind screams for distraction. In sitting with the silence until it speaks. In breaking patterns that your parents and culture normalized. That's spiritual warfare. And it starts with a simple sacred no. Don't confuse stimulation with significance. The world will flood you with options to feel something, as long as it keeps you from feeling what matters. But Jesus didn't call you to feel something. He called you to become someone. And becoming takes work. Becoming requires discomfort. Becoming demands subtraction before expansion. That's why pleasure is so dangerous. It tricks you into thinking you're alive when you're just entertained. But you weren't born to be a spectator. You were born to transform. And nothing changes until you stop feeding the system that profits from your numbness. You keep asking God for purpose, but won't let go of the habits that are killing your sensitivity to Him. You can't hear clearly when your mind is high on constant pleasure. It's like trying to see through a fog of comfort. That's why Jesus constantly called people to repent, not just of evil, but of distractions, of attachments, of anything that kept them from seeing. Because repentance isn't guilt, it's clarity, it's vision. It's waking up from the lie that you can have peace without sacrifice. You can't. You have to choose, the cheap thrill or the slow burn of becoming. Comfort doesn't want you to grow. It wants you to repeat, to cycle, to stay predictable, manageable, forgettable. That's why the enemy doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to keep you entertained, numb, distracted, and slowly, the life that once burned in you turns cold. But Jesus didn't die so you could cope. He died so you could conquer. And conquering starts when you stop letting your cravings choose your future. Some of the things you love are the very things holding you back, and you'll never rise if you're still bowing to them. If you want power, you have to stop protecting your pleasure. Jesus didn't play both sides. He didn't mix light with noise. He walked straight through temptation and then said, "Follow me." You keep asking for direction while defending the very habits that keep you blind. But real vision requires pruning. You can't grow and stay comfortable. You can't be free and stay entertained. If you want to be dangerous to the darkness, you have to starve the things that keep you quiet. And that begins with brutal honesty about what you've been calling normal. You don't need another reminder. You need a decision. The truth is already in you. You've just been drowning it in noise. And that's the real tragedy. Most people don't reject truth. They numb it. They scroll past it. They laugh at it. They call it too intense or too deep. But Jesus didn't come for shallow people. He came for those ready to dig, to burn, to be reborn. And that only happens when you finally stop defending what's slowly destroying you. If it's killing your fire, your focus, your spirit, it's not innocent, and it's time to name it. Pleasure can be beautiful when it serves your spirit, but when it replaces your soul, it becomes poison. You know this. You've felt the hollowness after the high, the guilt that follows the indulgence, the silence that lingers when the noise fades. And still, you go back. But today, you don't have to. Today you can stop. You can choose something higher. And when you do, when you finally let comfort die, you'll find what you've been chasing all along. Not stimulation, not escape, but peace. Deep, brutal, lasting peace. The kind that doesn't fade when the screen goes black. You've tried everything else. You've chased pleasure, approval, attention, escape, and none of it made you whole. Not for long, because you weren't made to be filled with what fades. You were made for something eternal, and that starts with surrender. Not the weak kind. The kind that says, "I'm done being ruled by what comforts me." The kind that invites Jesus not just to forgive you, but to free you, to confront you, to lead you out of what you've been calling life and into something real. This isn't about being better. It's about being new. And new requires death. Let the impulse die. Let the craving burn out. Let the noise fall silent. You were made for more than reaction. You were made for resurrection. And resurrection only comes after a cross, so here's the cross. Every pleasure that promised peace but delivered poison. Every habit that stole your presence. Every moment you escaped instead of healed. Lay them down. Let them die. Because Jesus doesn't want your performance. He wants your freedom. And today, freedom starts with one final, brutal, liberating truth. Pleasure is destroying you. If you let it.